First, I'd like to thank everyone for showing up for this meeting. And up here's Jean. Alright, so we're here tonight about the bond that we're looking at to update and modernize both schools within the Ludlow-Mount School District. And here to make a presentation, we have Eric from EEI, and that's called Energy Efficiency Investment.
You ready to go?
Yep.
Hello, everyone. Try to get away from the mic so I don't have too much feedback here. My apologies. Normally I wouldn't use a mic, but people think I need it, I'll use it. I'm Eric Lafayette from Burlington, Vermont. I am a Vermonter, so don't judge me right off the bat. I'm not mistaken. We are a New England-based ESCO company. So an ESCO is an energy service company. So what we kind of specialize in is what's called performance contracting. We have an office. I'm actually located in Williston, Vermont. We have another office in Merrimack, New Hampshire, an office in Scarborough, Maine. And really what we kind of specialize in are these school renovations and doing what we call performance energy contracting, where we go in and we do an energy audit on a building. We look for different measures to help reduce people's energy usage and utility bills. And then we apply those energy savings towards the construction project to hopefully reduce your guys' operating expenses. So what we're going to talk about today is obviously the Ludlow-Mount School District. So we started working with the SU a couple years ago to examine all of the schools in the supervisory union. We actually worked at first at Green Mountain, Chester, Andover, and Cavendish schools. Unfortunately, we had a failed bond vote this past about 6 months ago. At the same time, we were still working at Ludlow and Mount Holly, and we've reviewed schedules, goals, and budgets. So we actually had a breakout task force that met over the summertime. We brought in design professionals. We had architects in here, engineers. We met with the teachers. We met with the principals. We tried to understand what the needs of the schools are. And then what we did was we provided a bunch of different energy measures that will improve the school from both an operating standpoint, from an energy efficiency standpoint. We provided, and where we're at today is looking at schematic designs. Obviously, we're here at the public information meeting, and then coming up, we'd be looking at doing a March bond vote for this project. So what started out as really a process of looking at HVAC systems, building envelopes, building controls, lighting, really the stuff that has a direct impact on energy, grew a little bit to include some building addition, as well as classroom improvements to improve learning environments for the school as well. So most importantly, the need. So the need at both of these schools, they're actually pretty similar between the two. There's a lot of the same kind of projects, even though it's not the same scope at each school. We're addressing HVAC systems, so older boilers. The Ludlow boilers, I think, are from 1972. The boilers here are about 30 years old, so you guys have boilers that are end of life are actually past its expected life expectancy. They're what's called standard efficient boilers, so they're only 80%. They run off of fuel oil or number 2 oil. So they're not adequate to today's requirements for efficiency standards, and actually can't even really be sold today with the new upgraded code that's coming out. The roof at Ludlow has failed, so that means that there's actually already had some water penetration through the rubber membrane. We did what's called an IR analysis, so we actually did an infrared viewing of the roof, and we found that about 30% of the roof has already had water damage to the insulation below, which means that those areas we'd actually have to replace any insulation that's below the rubber membrane. And you guys actually utilize what's called tectum decking, which is your guys' what's actually below the insulation and holds up the roof from the steel structure. If that tectum decking gets wet, then it actually can fail, and you might actually have to replace some of the structure below the actual roof and the insulation in those areas. The roof here at Mount Holly still has a good 10 years left in it based off of an inspection, so that's not included as part of this project. Other needs, Mount Holly is just overcrowded, and I think if you guys walked around the school, you would notice that yourselves. but they're using the cafeteria for occupational and physical therapy. There's really no breakout spaces for how they teach kids today. Music utilizes the gymnasium for their class. We have a nurse's office, which is somewhere right behind this curtain is the nurse's desk built into there. That's actually cut off the ADA access to the gym as well. Spaces and fixtures are not accessible by wheelchair. So when these two buildings were built, ADA, which is Americans with Disability Act, has changed. So there's actually bathrooms in here that don't meet ADA requirements, or they don't have enough proper bathrooms here for the current American with Disabilities Act. Same thing at Ludlow, we'd be renovating a set of bathrooms for ADA purposes as well, including dual height drinking fountains at the schools for ADA purposes, and then really addressing a lot of cabinetry and fixtures that you can't access with a wheelchair. Life safety systems, so fire alarm at both schools, replacement of the fire alarm system that's obsolete. Electrical upgrades, so that's going to be included at both schools. So the electrical service to each of the schools is not sized for the dehumidification and heat pump systems that we're proposing for these schools. So part of this project is the transition off of fossil fuels and moving towards more renewable energy sources. And really the electrical services are not sized to pick up the heat pump technology that we're proposing for these schools. And then we want to make sure that whatever electrical service that we are proposing here has the ability to pick up any future load. So part of this project is the replacement of the boilers. The boilers would be moved from oil to either wood chip or propane. So we get rid of the number 2 fossil fuel use. We just want to make sure that whatever electrical capacity we add to the school would potentially be able to pick up, let's say, a heat pump boiler in the future when the technology gets there to go 100% renewable or 100% electric. So not only thinking about what the needs of the schools are today, but making sure that any project that we're proposing has that future outlook for that next generation project. And then really classrooms don't have the proper ventilation or outside air that they need, and then really improving the school security at both schools as well. Building heating systems, I've been touched on this before. Those are the boilers specifically at Ludlow from 1972. There's 2 of them over there. There's 1 single boiler here at Mount Holly. The boiler here has had issues in the past. I think they had a cracked heat exchanger section last year that got replaced. So if the boiler here goes down, essentially there's nothing to back it up. They either have to bring in some kind of temporary boiler, which are almost impossible to find, or you'd be looking at doing some kind of emergency replacement and going back with a brand new fuel oil boiler that probably nobody would reinvest in today and not getting it. So trying to be proactive in your guys' decision making and getting rid of systems before they have catastrophic failure so you can plan for long-term improvements. Both schools are operate off a pneumatic-based control system, so you actually have air in these little tubes that go around and push open your guys' outside air, open up control valves, and it's called a pneumatic system. They really haven't been installed in 30 plus years. Very few people work on them. Now everything's electric based, so it'd be electronic controls. It's all controlled through like your Cat 6, like data wiring that you would see at your house. So really getting the building off of a pneumatic system that doesn't allow you to do like say night setbacks, modulate the air depending on the amount of kids inside of the space. So by going with an electronic DEC control system, it really allows us to pinpoint the HVAC in these buildings with the specific areas that need it. So each classroom would have its own thermostat, each classroom would have its own CO2 sensor to make sure that we're only ventilating the spaces that the kids are in there and the spaces actually has a need for it. And then on top of it, both buildings just utilize fossil fuels. So in general, utilizing fuel oil has 30% more CO2 output than a typical LP system. We'd also be switching some of these. We'd also be switching some of these what they call shoulder seasons. So those days that are, say 35 degrees in the morning, but they heat up to 60 degrees in the afternoon in the fall and in the spring. Those seasons, we'd actually be able to heat the buildings through heat pumps. So utilizing the ventilation heat pump technology to provide shoulder season heating and dehumidification. And then on the really cold days, we'd be firing up the wood chip boilers as your primary heating source. So just wanted to touch base on the wood pellet system that we were discussing. This is a project that we just got done in Tunbridge, Vermont this year. They're operating off of this pellet boiler. This is actually a remote boiler room, which is very similar to what we would have to do here at Mount Holly because you guys have limited space inside your existing boiler room. So we'd add another shed-looking building like this, a nice grain silo, which is your hopper that holds the pellets, would be right next to it. And then we would pipe the hot water supply and return underground into your guys' existing boiler room. And then that's how we would heat the building. The nice things about utilizing wood pellets is that historically, at least for the last few years, pellets are about 1/3 the cost of fossil fuels. So it's much cheaper energy source. The wood pellets are locally sourced. They stay at roughly 80% of the cost, stay within a 60-mile radius of the actual facility where those pellets are being used. So it helps with the local economy. The EPA considers wood pellets a renewable energy source, so they consider it CO2 neutral. The amount of CO2 that it produces is the same amount that it takes in to actually grow the tree. So you'd be reducing your CO2 output. And then the propane boilers that we'd be installing alongside of the wood pellet would be your real modulating boilers, so those would pick up. Wood pellets are really good at kind of going full steam and providing a lot of heat. What's not good is that ramping up and ramping down. So we'd add an LP boiler that would kind of pick up those shoulders. And then the removal of the existing underground fuel oil tanks, which I'm sure everyone would be happy about. So getting rid of both underground fuel oil tanks. Ventilation and dehumidification. So right now, both schools utilize, actually at Ludlow, the original part of the school doesn't even have ventilation or outside air into the classrooms. It just has an exhaust system. So there's no way to really clean the air or filter it or make sure that there's good ventilation inside of the space. Part of this project would be removing the ground-mounted unit ventilator. So in each one of the classrooms, there's a unit. It's pretty good size. I don't have a picture of it. I'm trying to explain it, but it brings in air from the outside. There's a coil in it, and there's a fan. So this unit actually heats up, the raw, negative 10-degree outside air, and it heats it to a point where it can actually be used inside of the school, which is say 95 or 100 degrees discharge off of the unit. So it takes a tremendous amount of energy to be able to heat that really cold air to provide ventilation inside of the classrooms. So what we would be doing is going with a central ventilation system. So the unit ventilators that are in the classrooms would come out. We would go with either roof-mounted units. This is a project that we are doing at Spalding High School right now. Same project, we got rid of the unit ventilators. We went with a centralized ducted heat pump system. So this unit on the roof that you see can provide heating to the classrooms. It actually dehumidificates the classroom. So we're not trying to cool the space, but we're trying to make sure that we're taking the moisture out. So we're trying to maintain that 55-degree relative humidity that provides a good comfort for the people inside the space. And the nice thing about not going full cooling is it just allows us to really downsize the equipment and a lot of that infrastructure upfront costs that probably wouldn't have as great of a return because these schools aren't utilized in the summer on our hottest days. Decreased classroom noise and verifiable outside air. So those are two improvements that you would also get with this. And then actually having that, what I called before, that demand controlled ventilation, where we're monitoring the CO2 inside the space and we're adjusting the amount of outside air into the space depending on how many occupants are in there. Electrical and fire alarm upgrades. Ludlow Elementary School actually has 3 separate electrical entrances to the school, which is very odd. Typically schools do not have this. So part of this project would be bringing it back down to a single electrical entrance while making sure that it's sized to pick up the new HVAC equipment. We would install all new addressable fire alarms with voice evacuation. So actually having fire alarms that speak to the people inside the space and tell you what the situation is or why the alarm is going off. And then, like I mentioned before, just making sure that any electrical or fire alarm improvements that we do, that we're sizing it for any future expansion or service towards a switch to renewable energies. This touches on the roof at Ludlow. 23% of the roof, it looks like, had moisture damage for the report. And we do have a report here. I won't dive too much into it, but the insulation is known R value is only 2.5, which is way below the state requirement of an R40. So we'd be increasing the insulation on the roof as well as eliminating any insulation that's failed. And you can see there's a picture up top. Essentially, there's some whole sections of the roof that see moisture damage that we need to get out right away. And then this is a pretty rendering of the Mount Holly building addition. So you guys get a chance. Essentially, this would be going off if you walk through this door here, go straight past the art room. This would be essentially an addition off of the corridor where we have some small office spaces over here. So let me jump into what would be included with this addition. Shows it a little bit. So this is just a floor. This is obviously an aerial view of what the civil plan would look like. This would be the new addition footprint. As you can see, it encroaches on your guys' existing playground area here. It also would require a new septic tank as well as tying it back into the main septic service and the leach field out in the back over here. The size of the addition would be just below the state requirements for additional storm water improvements. That's an additional the 5-acre rule that they came up a couple of years ago. So being smart about how we size the addition and where we place it to avoid any major expenses that the state might push on the project. Another thing that you see over here is a drain line that's daylighting to the mound. Essentially, we'd be adding a French perimeter drain to this side of the building where you're seeing some moisture that gets in below this first classroom. This actually has a small basement underneath it. So we would add a French perimeter drain to this side of the building, add rain gutters to this side as well, and then improve the siding that you'll see over here to try to get rid of all the moisture that's getting underneath the building in this corner. Also, new grading would occur over here, which is another low point. So over the years that as they have built up the playground and added additional mulch, it's kind of created for this nice natural area for the water to collect on the side of the building. So we regrade it and then direct all of the water back naturally away from the school. So talking about the Mount Holly building addition, definitely the biggest need is space. As you can see here, this is a picture of what should be a cafeteria. They have it partitioned off. Trying to alleviate these space issues at Mount Holly with this new addition. And the way that we did so, while keeping costs down and not having to sprinkler the whole building, was essentially creating an addition off of this corridor. The reason why we did this is because we have to maintain a 3-hour firewall separation between the main existing building and the new addition. Part of the new addition would be taking the nurse's office, which is currently located here on the stage, creating a dedicated space in the new addition. These offices right here are currently built into a corridor, so I think each one might be maybe about 5 by 5. They're very small. There's no heat inside of them and there's no ventilation. They're pretty much built into an existing corridor. So it's taking the 3 offices in here and really giving them actual dedicated space that they can fit in. OT and PT would move out of the cafeteria into a dedicated space where they can actually keep their equipment and set up. And then we'd have a music/flex classroom at the end, which would give the school some ability if they had, one class that was bigger and they needed to have, say, 2 classes for that one grade, they'd actually have the ability inside the school to absorb that kind of bumper class as well. Other things that you see as part of this project, doors throughout the facility. So because the building is not sprinklered, we have to maintain fire ratings through all of the exit corridors, which none of the doors are currently rated, so we'll be improving all of the doors throughout the school. Upgrading the main bathrooms in the school right here for ADA purposes, so having 2 dedicated ADA bathrooms right as you enter the school. Improved school security, so adding a second set or making these doors more secured, including push-button access controls, additional cameras. This school actually already has a pretty good setup at Mount Holly, but one of the things would be having these doors normally closed so that you would push to get into here, you would meet with the front desk, and then they would allow you access through the rest of the school by buzzing the second set of doors. And then the same thing kind of goes for the entrance out into the playground over here. Improving the door access control over here, and really making sure that the students and teachers are utilizing programmed set of doors to access the playground to improve school security as well. LED lighting, so this is something that the state has actually banned the outlaw of fluorescent tubes. This project would remove all the fluorescent lighting that we have in now. You would go with all new fixtures. The new fixtures have, like daylight harvesting. So if you're close to a window, the lights auto dim to match the brightness at the desk. So you're actually saving energy by being close to a window and utilizing the natural daylight. It also comes, LED lighting is typically about 15% of the energy usage of a fluorescent lighting system. So you have 85% energy savings just by switching over to LED. On top of it, we would have dimming capabilities that they currently don't have now, and it includes lighting both inside the school and all the perimeter lighting and parking lot lighting as well for improved security. So some windows at Ludlow Elementary School. The windows that you see here, these are single pane windows. These are probably at least 50 years old. These are the windows to the cafeteria. So those windows would all get replaced. And then we'd be looking at replacing a lot of windows along the playground side of Ludlow as well. The windows here at Mount Holly, we'd be looking at addressing essentially the parking lot side. The first 2 classrooms that you'll see has the CMU or cement block wall siding. It's really not made to be on the outside of the building. So part of this project is creating proper air and water barriers on the perimeter of the building and improving the siding so that we're not actually getting moisture being sucked in through the perimeter or exterior walls of the building. All right, so this is interior, it's a big ticket, so we wanted to explain that a little bit more, but the interior building upgrades. Mount Holly, we'd be replacing all the flooring through the classrooms and down through the corridor. Replacing cabinetry in all the classroom spaces, and that's a common theme at both schools. Both schools have cabinets that are not ADA accessible, and they don't really work for the students. The heights are too high for the grades that the kids are utilizing the spaces for. And then looking at replacing painting pretty much all of the classrooms at both schools, replacing the ceilings here at Mount Holly, addressing the exterior walls at Mount Holly that I mentioned before, painting throughout both schools, so just upgrading a lot of the paint inside the classrooms. Really the goal is inside the classroom space, they're the learning environments, improving those for today's environment. We talked about doing bathrooms at both schools, doors here at Mount Holly, and then doing the security improvements at both schools as well. So vestibule improvements, door access control, and upgrading the cameras for accessing in and out of the building. So this drawing here just shows some of the areas where that existing CMU block is. So currently they have it on part of their cafeteria, and then this is actually the gymnasium here, and then those are the first 2 classrooms as you walk into the main entrance of the building. So those first 2 classrooms would get new windows, new doors, and then essentially we would gut the inside of both of those walls and rebuild those from the frame. So these 2 rooms at Mount Holly would see a significant amount of work. And then the siding, this is on the back side of the cafeteria, that would all get redone as well with proper air and moisture barriers. More pictures. This is showing some of the windows at Ludlow. This is the actual cafeteria windows here. Those would be getting replaced. Ludlow building upgrades. So I'll just explain this. Part of the project, there's a classroom here as you first walk into the space. I think at one point it held a pre-K space. Essentially, we would make that room a lot smaller. Sticking here at Ludlow, really addressing the entrance here. So part of the issue is that currently your front desk sits over here where this math intervention. It does not allow for a clear sight of entry of who's coming in and out of the building. So part of this project would be relocating the principal's desk to the main entry, adding essentially a window right here that would allow them access or view of the line of sight of whoever's coming into the building. Same type of theory that we would improve the door access here. So someone would come in, they would get buzzed in through this double set of doors. There would be another window here. They would meet with reception, and then they would be buzzed through this set of doors as well. Same type of plan that this door over here would get improved badge access. So eliminating teachers utilizing the doors that lead right out into their playground, and really making sure that everybody is using the same doors in and out of the school for recess and for extracurricular activities. And that's really important for both security purposes and for just these spaces do get used by the older grades, so making sure that the bathroom fits the actual size of the students utilizing the space. Other improvements, currently there's a space in here that's underutilized, so adding a door from the corridor and then making this a special education room, taking the actual, what's math intervention now, and moving it back towards where a lot of the other intervention space is inside of the school. And then there's a bunch of code issues down through this corridor, including some big glass windows that look inside the classrooms that would be coming out, improving the doors in these areas, and then replacing the ceilings, the lights, and the cabinetry inside this core space. The spaces, the classrooms that abut the playground over here, they would get new cabinetry as well, but really kind of limiting the amount of renovation to those spaces, and then improving the ventilation inside each one of these and improving the heat inside of them as well. So at Ludlow, main points are hitting the roof, major renovations to this core kind of part of the school, upgrading these 2 bathrooms that are just off of the gym. So there's a men's and women's bathroom here that would be upgraded for ADA purposes, and then addressing a lot of the HVAC issues. So this picture is just showing some of the finishes. So this is some of the cabinetry at Ludlow that we would be taking out. It's very dated, same over here. But for the most part, we'd be keeping the nice blue and white checkered floors. So what are you getting at the end of the day? We're getting HVAC systems that reduce fossil fuel usage, drastically reduces CO2 output, and puts the buildings on track for future 100% renewable energy. So we're taking HVAC systems that are really close to failing or at end of life, and putting essentially another 20 years of life back into them. Security upgrades, so it's addressing entrances at both schools, addressing how people access the building both in the morning and throughout the day with door access control systems, upgraded doors and hardware. It's addressing code compliance, so just over the years codes changed. So it's addressing American with Disability Acts with bathrooms, cabinetries, it's individual bathrooms, so adding individual bathrooms, which is more important today than it hasn't been in the past. Handrails, and really improving, there's a lot of ADA concerns about how you get into Ludlow and some of the ground that we have to improve as well. Improved learning environments, so cabinetry, floors, ceilings, and paints. So thinking like light, bringing in more natural light, lightening up the spaces, providing freshness, and then really trying to address the space concerns at Mount Holly. So true occupational physical therapy spaces, an actual nurse's office with a bathroom, and then providing that extra space should they have a bumper class or dedicated space for music. I would say overall, what you're looking at is energy efficiency, improved learning environments, code updates, addressing life safety systems, and building envelopes. We really tried to look at the things that if they fail, they could shut down the school. And then on top of it, how do we make sure that the learning environments that we're providing under this bond will meet the needs of the school for the next 20 years. So the measures, this is a breakout of the cost. The total bond would be just under $9.3 million. Approximately 4.2 of it would be allocated to Mount Holly, and around $5 million would be allocated to Ludlow. It does include a contingency of around 5%, and then these numbers were essentially based off a schematic set of drawings that we developed over the last few months, and then I worked with local vendors and subcontractors to get the budget-based pricing that we have today. If this bond gets approved in March, we finalize the drawings, and then we go out to bid in early spring on bid packages that we would be trying to accomplish that year. So if this bond passes, we'd work with the district right away to kind of prioritize what of these measures we would do first, which I believe is going to probably be the boilers and the HVAC system, then probably work on the addition in the fall, and then probably come back summer 2025 and really hit a lot of the interior building renovations at that point. In the hobbies. So what does that all mean? So on a 20-year bond, bonding will be pooled around the state. On a $250,000 assessed home, you'd be looking at approximately a $342 yearly property tax increase, which equates to about $137 per 100,000 of bond, and that's based on the base tax rate before the CLA is involved. And then as part of this project, we would also be reaching out to Efficiency Vermont, which is included in some of those numbers that I gave you, incentives and grant programs that they're administering. The state of Vermont does have a wood heat program that they've applied for funds on. And then we'd also apply for any state and federal grants that may become available between now and then. So that is my project. That's my presentation. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions. I'd be happy to answer at this time.
Yeah, just a quick question.
Just state your name first.
Oh, Francis Devine.
Good to meet you. This building.
No.
Francis Devine, I live here in Belmont. Quick question, you're talking about a lot of energy efficiencies too. So are those savings built in? How are they reflected in this project?
I I think anticipated, I had it on the original slide that I gave last time, but I think it's around, do you have that number on you? From the last, it's in that last matrix. Thanks. We'd be looking at savings of approximately $50,000 a year at Ludlow, and that's a combination of fuel switch savings and electrical savings. And then at Mount Holly, we'd be looking at about $29,000. So combined, it's right around $80,000 a year of annual savings through energy upgrades. And then we actually just heard back today on one of our wood heat rebate programs. So Ludlow did get the award for a $250,000 grant to go with wood chip or wood pellet. Unfortunately, Mount Holly got denied on that one. So we might have to make some changes to what that scope might look like. But the project was trying to utilize those $250,000 grants that are supplied through the state of Vermont wood heat program.
Millicent Johnson, Mount Holly. I have a lot of history with this school. I went to it. My children went to it. My grandchildren went to it. Currently, I have no students in the school, but that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about it. The proposed addition to this school is greater than the size of my house, and I have 2 levels in my house. You're talking 2,000 square feet of addition to the school, which is more than my house is. And I just can't grasp my head around that. When I went to school, the cafeteria was actually the 7th and 8th grade, and this is in the early 60s. So we'd already outgrown the school at that point. And then there was an addition that was made between the time that my children were in school and my grandchildren were in school. And, well, back up a little bit, we also had 2 classes in each room. 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th, 5th and 6th, and 7th and 8th, and we're in the cafeteria. Where we ate was in our classrooms. We went into the cafeteria, got our food from the hot lunch program, and went back and ate at our desks. When my children were in school, the cafeteria was used as a cafeteria. And the classes, there've been an addition to it before my children started. I'm sorry, there are 2 additions that have been going through here. They each had their own classrooms. And then we did another addition after they were out of school, which included this wonderful gymnasium. And now I understand we have students that are having to be, the class is so large that they're having to take up 2 rooms. And other classes are combined, is that correct? No?
Right, I can speak to that, but I think what you're saying is that room, that flex room, would be there to build in, because we can't predict the future, right?
Well,
I mean, I'm looking at Craig,
currently we have about 110 students here in the school. And projecting out 5 years, do you have a projection of where you think we're going to be in 5 years?
It's probably going to be roughly the same.
I wanted to hear them. I already talked to Craig about this, but what is your projection? Have you thought about that? We're talking about $9 million for the 2 schools, $4 million for the Mount Holly School addition, and all of the improvements, which I have no problem with the improvements. It's important for the students to be in a comfortable position in order to learn. My concern is, are we putting our money where it needs to be into 2,000 square feet of additional building when we might be needing to look at how are we utilizing it now And how will we be using it in 5 years? Are we going to be putting ourselves into a bond for 20 years, which in 5 years' time, we won't be utilizing all of the rooms that we had in the school because the numbers have decreased? Is this something that you have looked at and considered?
And I think I was on the facilities committee that was working with all of this, and I would say we have for sure. I'm not gonna speak for everybody on the board. I can also say that some of the proposed rooms are, sorry.
Hello. All right, I can also say that some of the proposed rooms are office spaces that are not, you have kids who are doing therapy, whether it's speech therapy, OT, PT, not in private spaces. We have, what I would consider an unsafe situation with a nurse's office is on a stage and not, if we were talking 3 years ago and kids were being isolated because of COVID and we were waiting for parents to come who might be working in Rutland or wherever, they would be sitting in a nurse's office with that's just partitions on a stage. Those are the kinds of things, those are the spaces that I think are the most important for the bond and for the budget and for this scenario.
I could answer to some extent on that. We did bring an architect in that did programming review, met with Craig a couple times at least. I know that they review what they use on a regular basis. She tries to always find, really cost-effective approaches to utilizing space. I think one of the major issues is that they just, if you go into the cafeteria, it's filled up with a lot of those OT and PT spaces, and I can tell you that what schools are providing today as a service to the community is a lot different than what schools were providing 10 or 15 years ago. And that the occupational and physical therapy and speech therapy are stuff that I think is from the state level and from the AOE level has really risen to the top as being a priority. And even since COVID, that individual catch up for students has been even more important. So I do have to say that the way that they teach today is a little bit different than they did 10 years ago. And I do think that, the added space will hopefully address that.
One of the things that I had written down and I forgot to mention was, before we made an addition, one of the additions, I can't remember which one it was, we put up temporary offices on the school property. And how many years did we use those? 3 years? Can anyone remember? We used them for 3 years for office spaces. Is that something that you considered instead of putting up a 2,000 square foot building addition to maybe having a couple of office spaces rented until we see how the population of our school is going to be in 5 years' time? I just think that we're putting a lot into office space, which is needed because the state requires things, but is it the best expense that we should be putting out at this time?
Okay, so one of the things about the office space, people call it office space, it's not like secretaries or whatever. We're talking about speech and language, we're talking about physical therapy, occupational therapy, and this is something that over the last really 30 plus years has increased. And the children that need this are on IEPs, and it's part of their IEPs, and we're required to provide that for kids. So it's not really an office, we use that word, but it's really a space where they can get these services. And all children deserve what they need in order to learn. So that's why we're doing some of this renovation.
Steve Michelle from Mount Holly. To follow through on her conversation then, is many schools use trailers, which then can be, if you wish to use your term, office space for physical therapy or whatever outside the building, and can then be utilized if for a lot less money. And you could then determine down the road if you've got the body count of students to support what you want to build. And as an aside, the building you're building has a flat roof. And I don't want to be the guy going up on that roof shoveling the snow off after there's 2 feet up there. I was told this evening that they actually went back and rebuilt the roof on this school because it was initially built as flat, and they ultimately put a pitched roof in. So the drawing that you have is inappropriate for the space that's up here, even if you decide to go that way. And the other last question I've got is not so much this school, I would assume from what you're saying, but I'll lay it out for both schools. Is it worth investing the money in the schools? Or would it be better to build from the ground up something new, even though it would cost a lot more? That's not a popular thought.
That comment came up a lot. It was looked at into.
You're pouring money, I'm gonna go with the Ludlow school more so than this. You're pouring money into a school to try and bring it up to date. And, yeah, it's a 50-year-old building. And this is a 30-year-old building. A part of it. Yeah, sorry.
We did, yeah, I mean, we certainly looked at analysis of what a new school could potentially cost. Typically, a new elementary school of say, I think this school right now is about 20,000 square feet. If we had the 2,000, you're about 22,000 square feet. And you're seeing construction costs around $600 a square foot for new construction. So it's about, $13.5 million to build, and that's just the hard cost. That doesn't take into account permitting, land acquisition, or any of the other stuff, which usually accounts for about 40% of the project cost. So I know we did discuss it. It's about, I would say you'd be looking around 18 to 20 million to build a new school, specifically for Mount Holly. And I know there was a lot of desire on the board to keep their community schools and keep something local, which is what ultimately led to the reinvesting of these schools to make sure that they're strong community assets for a lot of years and not get rolled into a consolidation effort of other schools.
Back to the first part then. Did you consider trailers instead of building a new addition? What is the addition like?
I'm sorry. The addition's like another $1 million of what you're spending here.
Yeah.
And also, you seem to skip over doing the roof at Ludlow. You talk about it, but when you were ending up saying what pieces you were going to do, the roof sort of got.
Oh, the roof is,
which is
the roof is on the
biggest
project
piece.
at Ludlow. Absolutely. No, we'd be replacing the whole roof at Ludlow.
Okay.
And I would suggest going with a flat roof on this new addition. It would hold our new mechanical equipment, and then we would just make sure that we size the structural load of it to pick up any snow load that could potentially come. So.
Hi, Dennis Devereaux here. I was a first grader in this school, and it was pretty special to go from 3 one-room schoolhouses down to this new school, even though there was 3 classrooms and the multi-purpose room for the 7th and 8th graders. So I know there's an awful lot of mandates that have got us where we are now. And it's really a concern for every school board. And school board members have told me that they actually control about less than 5% of what their budgets are because of the rising cost of transportation, fuel, and everything, healthcare that all goes with it and stuff. I was glad to hear about heat pumps a little bit, because the write-up that I saw in the newsflash talked about wood pellets and LP, and I'm not quite sure that wood pellets are renewable. I think in the future they will, simply burning wood is down the road probably not going to be renewable at some point in the direction we're going. So heat pumps, I'm sure. You know, I agree that these buildings need a lot of work and a lot of updating, and things have been gone for a while, and for safety reasons and efficiency and everything, it's all, I understand that. But I also know that when school budgets pass in March, and the projected increase of around 18% this year and 12% next year, and it's not, I'm not blaming the school boards or anybody else. All I know is you take those figures, and I'm pretty sure young people are having a tough time buying a place here. May never own a house here, by the way. I think, I'm sorry to say, the enrollments probably will be dropping anyway, and our cost per pupil are pretty high now. I think it's going to be a pretty hard sell, and I'm not saying it's not necessary, but I don't know what else to tell you. But I know that property taxes are a real concern for the older residents that have lived here a long time. And I guess we'll find out more down the road how this all sugars off. Thank you.
I'm Andy Tanger in Mount Holly. And I'm just curious, since in Mount Holly we consider Ludlow to be far more of a resort town than we consider Mount Holly. Is it reasonable to assume that the enrollment in Ludlow would remain relatively stable? We hear people saying that 90% of the new home sales in Ludlow are people that are second homeowners. So again, I don't know that it has any real influence on the question before us right now, but as a point of interest, does Ludlow think that they're going to be able to maintain a stable enrollment in that school? That would be addressed to somebody over to my right.
I'd say yes. I think it's going to stabilize and stay level like it has for the last 2, 3, 4 years. So I think it's going to stay stable. Yeah, I think. Yeah, oh yeah, stable. Hopefully go up, being real optimistic. Hopefully it's going to go up some, but I think it's going to stay right around where it is. Just
if I could have a quick follow-up reference to something that Dennis said just a moment ago. Are wood pellets, is that considered biomass?
Yes, yes it is. Yep.
Yeah, I'm just curious because occasionally large biomass proposals, such as Dartmouth College, I think, ran into a roadblock with biomass. And I'm wondering if ours is feasible only because of the much smaller scale.
I mean, the Dartmouth one was feasible as well. That was more like a grassroots kind of campaign to nix it. I mean, there's a lot of debate. It's considered a renewable energy source because the trees grow back after you burn them at the end of the day. But it's not as good as, say, like going with a heat pump system where you're not actually preventing. But the reality is that these buildings are already built around essentially 180-degree hot water to heat these buildings. And there's not a heat pump boiler out right now that has the technology that's able to get you that 180 degree that allows us to reuse a lot of the infrastructure that you guys have.
So we'll save a little bit of the cordwood for those of us that burn wood.
So I do think like long term though, you could see something like 20 years down the line where those pellet biomass boilers come out and it goes with a heat pump boiler and it's 100% renewable from there.
Actually, maybe one question and a comment. The question, you talked about a lot of moisture going into several of these buildings, water damage and so on. What is the risk of mold right now?
I would say the risk is fairly high.
Now the comment, and I guess I'm a senior citizen, we're fixed income. Don't like to pay more taxes if I can avoid it. However, I am also in a situation where we are a senior town hoping that young people will move into this town. And I am just wondering if we have trailers, and I'm just using your example as your point as an example, Milson. If we have trailers out front, will that be attractive to young couples coming and looking for a school for their kids? Or will they be looking elsewhere where there's no trailers? If we have trailers out front, do we have to make them all ADA, do we have to meet those requirements? So I'm just sitting here saying, yeah, I don't want to pay more taxes, but boy, I would really love to have a lot of young people in this town so that we get more volunteers. We've just lost our rescue squad because we don't have young people. We don't have people to fill the positions. So I see the Mount Holly School and the probably the Ludlow School too as a real draw for young couples, as long as we do it right. So that's a big nut. $9 million is a lot of money. But, I just wonder if it's a worthwhile investment to try to draw people in. Because we're talking, we're wondering, will the enrollment drop? Well, I don't want to sit around here with the school that has mold possibly developing in it and watch people move out because they have a better school elsewhere. So, if we don't do anything, we may see the enrollment drop. If we do something, we may see the enrollment stay stable or increase. That's kind of my thinking at this point.
Can I do a counter argument? Most of the time, I feel people come to this area, if it's for the school, it's for its reputation, not necessarily for its physical plant. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a trailer or a series of trailers would be in the parking lot up front. They could be behind the school or in another area. I mean, you're talking as if it's being advertised and that it's going to be seen. And a lot of other schools have used as bridges to get to where they want to be, use trailers as intermediate steps.
Fair enough. Temporarily is one point there. The other point is, if I have a child, I'm looking for a good school to come to. The child might need OT and PT. I'm going to go to a school where they're inside a building, where they have a disability, it's easy for them to move around. Going to a trailer hidden out back is not something that's desirable to me. That's all I'm saying.
Hi, I'm Oliver Ellis. I'm a 5th grader at the Mount Holly School, and I want to for people who are on the edge about this or wondering about it, I think it's important to think about everything. And I'm a student who uses DOT services, and I'd like to remind everybody, it's like it's a pretty crucial tool to a lot of the students at our school. A lot of them are using services like PT and OT and special ed and those things. So I think it's pretty important that those things are considered, and I appreciate that that's getting thought about for the new, with the new improvements and the new addition. I know that that it's gonna, affect a lot of other things such as taxes and stuff like that. But I just, for people who are, I just want to let everybody know that, there's a lot of people who are relying on these things, and that Mount Holly Schools it has to have a good learning environment, and so yeah. I also had another question. How soon will the addition probably, I was kind of confused, how long is when the new addition at the playground, when is that gonna be, fully, when is that gonna be started, the work on that, and when is it going to be, in use? I'm guessing it's probably not in the time that I'm here.
If you have concerns about your playground, excellent job. Great, very good. If this bond passes in March, our plan was to break ground in late summer 2024. So we would anticipate having that, it's about an 8-month construction timeline. So we would anticipate having that open for March of 2025, somewhere March or April of 2025. We might still be here. And we'd have to make sure that we maintain access to playgrounds and all of those other fun things. And,
Yeah.
we have the site set up so you guys still can utilize this space for the best that you can during your school year. And then once that addition is built, we'll get in the fall and summer and, renovate the rest of the spaces.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it and think it's a good idea of all the energy efficiency improvements and the new addition.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Andrea from Mount Holly. I actually moved back here for the school specifically. I lived in Tennessee for 3 years, and my kid was struggling big time. He had a lot of speech problems. He was not speaking properly. And I moved back here specifically to get him into the school, which is where my brothers attended, under Craig. And they immediately got him on an IEP. They told me that 80% of students that go on an IEP don't come off of it. My kid is now speaking clearly and off of the IEP. This school needs OT. That's how you're gonna get people like me back here. Like it was said, it's really important that we expand those classrooms, that they have that space. And the other thing I wanted to touch on, Dennis, you mentioned the 18% tax hike. I can't speak to this too well because I don't have all of the information, but I did do some research. They're saying that there's gonna be additional rebates for that tax hike, so that it's going to eventually not be an 18% increase. We'd actually see a decrease in the tax. So I would look into that a little bit more. That is a future part on the tax. I see heads shaking, but I looked into it and I've heard it from other people too, so.
I had a question about security in the schools. I know that you have to ring to get into the school. Is there security cameras currently?
Yeah, we have a few.
You have one at the entrance?
Yeah.
And that is monitored where?
In
We're
front.
not gonna give out information about how we do security in a public setting because we don't want bad actors to know how we do those things.
Okay, my suggestion was going to be that we put in a security system that has a monitor in the office where there is always somebody there monitoring it. Unbelievable.
Dennis, again, Craig, it might be helpful to me, maybe others, if you would point out those, is it 9 classrooms that I see? I know there's a library there, in there too. Which classes are in there? Because I know there's a kindergarten in 1st through 6th grade, that's 7. And I know there's a library. Okay.
That's what I wanted to know, how much. I know we combined 4th and 5th grade a few years ago or something, there was a lower number.
Yeah, so you're right, there's a library. There's a preschool classroom for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds.
Craig, can you use this laser pointer so we can see where the numbers are?
So that's preschool. That's the library. That's kindergarten. And kindergarten is a standalone classroom. And then the remaining rooms are, what we've done is we have some classes that are quite large. We were talking about how our 5th grade class right now is 23, but we have some classes that are smaller. So by having 2 grade levels combined at each, so there's 2 1-2 classrooms, there's 2 3-4 classrooms, and there's 2 5-6 classrooms. So that way, when we have really big swings in population from one grade level to another, we can smooth that out and have class sizes that are, 12 to 18 instead of, ones that are 23 and 9, if that makes sense. So all of those classrooms, the remaining classrooms are the 2 1-2s, the 2 3-4s, and the 2 5-6s. Makes sense? Is that?
That doesn't free up one classroom, right? For offices, I'm just looking at the.
No, there's no extra unused, no. Yeah, and after the meeting, if people would like to go on a little tour, I'm happy to walk through the school. I mean, we literally have a school-based clinician in a closet that we put a window in. And that room back there, that was where we used to store tables and chairs. We took half of the entrance to the gym foyer because we need room for a math interventionist. A number of people have talked about all of the new and different types of services that are now required that were not part of schools 30 years ago. It's quite a long list. So there's the school nurse, there's math intervention, reading intervention, speech and language pathology, occupational therapy, speech and language, and some others that I'm forgetting, guidance counseling. There's quite a few. And those are all unfunded mandates.
I'm curious a little bit more about the student population. My name is Jay. I have a couple of students that are at Mount Hall. I'm curious, all of these conversations about both buildings and projected student populations, who's making those estimates? How do we know? You say that you hope that it stables off, but am I correct that Ludlow's student population has decreased over the last couple of years and Mount Hall is increasing? And where do we look going forward? And how do we do that?
So the TRSU just this year, as a result of hiring a group called NESDEC, the New England's school demographic corporation, to help with their new superintendent search. One of the services they provide is ongoing projected enrollments. So they've received the data from us and from the area, and they are getting back to us. I actually just received it today with their projections for the upcoming enrollment for all 4 of our elementary schools and also for the 7-12 school at Green Mountain. I haven't been through all of it in detail. We'll share it out with everybody once we have it. They said it arrived today. But just in glancing at it, it looks as though their projections, for what they're worth, are that they expect things to stay pretty steady. They actually have a prediction of Ludlow going up a little bit and of Mount Holly going down a little bit. And by a little bit, I mean a couple of students over the next 10 years. How good are those projections? As they will tell you, because it's such a small size overall for both of these communities, they're making projections about how many students will be born 5 years from now. And they really, that there's limited security in that. But looking at things over the last few years, Ludlow has gone down by a few students. Mount Holly has gone up by a few students. And those numbers during the time I've been here the last 6 years have stayed pretty consistent. We'll share the information from the people who do this. It's part of the service they provide for everybody to see. And the only other thing I would say is that it's true, you can always decide to do a temporary action to try to look at whether or not you really need those extra things. And if you decide in 5 years you really need those extra things, it will cost you so much more than it would cost you right now to do it.
Hi, I'm Nikki Ummel. I have fourth grader here. I feel like we've done those temporary things. We've got stuff over here. We can't do school concerts on the stage that you guys spend a ton of money on to make the stage because there's a nurse's office. I feel like $9 million is a lot of stinking money. Like my first reaction is, holy cow. But then my next reaction is, how much did I just spend on a bag of groceries at Hannaford? And for one bag of groceries costing over $100 right now, I feel like that return on $400 a year on a $250,000 property tax or house for property taxes, I feel like that's a pretty good deal. It's a lot of money, but that's a couple bags of groceries. I can make the adjustment. I can switch it up.
As I'm sitting here thinking too, like we talked about this summer when we were going through all of this, there are some of these projects that really have to be done. Boilers are failing a lot. I mean, I don't know, not on the daily, obviously the kids are here and there's heat, but those boilers aren't gonna last long. We have to do that. There's things that we have to do, roofs that are leaking and things like that. If we're spending that money, it seems to me like we may as well do it all together, do what we have. We know those projects have to be done, and we know that we're gonna make some money back on the efficiencies. And like Warren just said, if we wait 5 or 10 years, the cost of that construction is going to be that much more, and we will have put Band-Aids on the furnaces that much longer than we've spent that, what I call bad money, trying to Band-Aid that boiler. I mean, we've done that. I've been on the school board a really long time. My kids are 25 and 28, and I've been on the school board most of that time. That boiler has been an issue the entire time I've been on the school board. It's not gonna last much longer. It's not fixable anymore. There are people who I have heard say, we're not gonna work on that. I've been down in that space with an old person, not an old person, that's the wrong way to say that, sorry, a former custodian who worked here. She and I went down there one day when it was broken, when the school wasn't in session. It's been breaking since then, and that was many, many, many years ago. If we don't fix it, we're gonna spend more money in a few years.
Yeah, Kelly was talking about the boiler here. I want to add just to the, you touched on the oil tank that's in the ground, and this is my 20th year here, and that tank was in the ground when I arrived. And people back then were talking about how it was was reaching its life. So when you think about a house and you think about deferred maintenance and how, you know, being penny wise can end up being pound foolish, you know, you think about what's gonna happen if that tank starts to leak. That's gonna be really expensive to try to fix.
I have one thing to add. I just wanted to add that the board, when we first started down this path, we really had sticker shock and it was a lot higher. And we talked about what can we do so that we get everything we need, but not more than what we need. That was kind of our, I guess, litmus test. And one of the things we also talked about was we don't want to do a 20-year bond and have to come back in 5 years and say, guess what? We need to do another bond. We wanted to do everything and we wanted to build for the future and make sure that what needs to be done is done. And I will say that I have seen 2 schools, neighboring schools, well, one kind of down the road and one over in the other side of Vermont, that didn't do necessary maintenance, and both of them had gym roofs that collapsed. That's Arlington High School and Springfield High School. And they had to shut sections of their buildings off for like a year. It was really bad. So I just wanted to put that out there. It's not that we want to spend the money, but we think it's necessary.
Judy, that was my question as well. Lisa Schmidt from Ludlow. I imagine that when you first got the project, that the number was much higher. What were some of the things that you deleted from the project?
Yes, I think I can answer some of that. I mean, I think when we looked at this project specifically, you know, we really we brought in an architect that went through and actually graded every single piece of, like every single fixture, every cabinet, every floor got graded A through F, depending on, you know, how much useful life that they had. I think originally there was a lot of like C's and maybe even some B's in our pricing. Anything that was graded in A was kind of deemed, all right, we didn't have to look at it for replacement. I think originally we were in that like $16 million range, and then we pared it down to this number. So a lot of it was cutting back on just the general size scope of how much square footage do we looking towards renovation. You know, I know that we pulled back. Originally we were talking about redoing the ventilation throughout all of Ludlow, and then we really kind of focused it on the classroom areas and those high impact zones. So those were 2 of the big areas that I noticed. Solar was something that was reviewed at both sites. Both roofs are not structurally sound to actually pick up additional solar load. So those were removed from the project. What other things did we talk about?
Wait, there was air conditioning, Eric?
There was
full air conditioning at both schools, full window, dehumidification will make a huge difference. Full window replacement at Ludlow we started with, and then scoped that back. The roof here at Mount Holly, that was on the original, that was 16 million, we scoped that back as well.
Additional envelope improvements, because a lot of it is like spot vinyl repair on the back, and you know, where there's been failed vinyl. So yeah, before it was a full envelope upgrade, so that got removed out of the Mount Holly project specifically. We tried to look at every component. I know a lot of those facilities assessments I think are still available. I'm happy to share any of those, you know, reports that were provided by our architects and engineers as well.
It's me again. Is it possible to separate out new construction from maintenance? As I stated when I first spoke, I have no problem with doing the maintenance on the buildings that need to be done. My biggest issue is the 2,000 square foot addition that you're planning on putting onto the school. and whether that is where we best spend our money at this time. And that's why I brought up the suggestion of doing temporary trailers, as you call them. Can it be cut off? Can the construction be separate from the maintenance?
So, the estimated cost of the addition is $1.4 million, right? And as we heard from Craig and others, there are elements of that addition that are completely required. I mean, yes, we could do trailers temporarily, but it's not, a trailer isn't a permanent solution. We know that we're going to continue to need speech therapy, occupational therapy, and so that need, even if we go down half a dozen or a dozen students, the need for those services is not going to go away. Having a music room so they don't have to do their music instruction here in the gym, to me that need is not going to go away. As Eric said, if we do have a bump in students, we could conceivably make that a regular classroom in the future. But even if we don't have that, it'll get used as a music room. So could it be separate? Sure, but I mean, again, I see the need for the addition as just as important as the needs for the renovations, the repairs.
Sarah, listen, you keep referencing the 2,000 square foot home, how you have your 2,000 square foot home. There are a lot of kids, there are like 100 kids at this space. So you have to figure, you're not talking about just you and your family living in the space, you have to figure the space is bigger. I don't get why I'm being left out, I don't appreciate that. The space is bigger because there are more children, there are more people in a space, so maybe think about it like that.
I question whether the 2,000 square foot is needed for the services that will be provided. The school is already over 20,000 square feet. I'm not saying we're going to put 100 children into 2,000 square feet. Obviously not. This is going to be separated out into separate rooms. My question is the space what is actually required at this time?
I would put just a quick point to some of that is that the state of Vermont has come out with new standards, school construction standards. Those will continue to get updated over the next year as well. Facilities assessments and providing dedicated spaces to those types of services is a major aspect of doing these facilities assessments and making sure that the buildings meet the needs of the public. And from a whole, the legislature and the AOE's doing a complete inventory of all the schools around the state and grading them and looking at all of them and trying to determine what the long-term plan of schools in the state of Vermont are ultimately going to look like. And I think making sure that your school has a lot of those services and has the infrastructure and the capital improvements needed for that facility so that it's, that people can see that this is a long-term investment and hasn't been held up by Band-Aids. I think it's going to go a long way towards making sure that these schools remain part of the community for the long term. And I think that was a major aspect of looking at what kind of kept in this project. I know originally when I came from the start, it was looking at boilers and heating systems and lighting. I think, once we came here and did a walkthrough and did assessments of it, we can't justifiably tell people to do these major infrastructure improvements if the programming needs of the schools don't meet their current need. So that's what drew us more towards looking at the programming and doing these meetings with Craig. I know at Ludlow, Obviously, it's a completely different situation where they have a school that's probably too big for the amount of school kids that they have in there right now, which really opens up a lot of other opportunities to provide other services that other school districts in the state probably wouldn't have the opportunity to do. So the programming needs, I know we're very closely looked at. I think these school assessments and long-term capital needs is going to be something that's going to come to highlight more in the legislature here in the near future, and making sure that these community, rural, small schools stay in business, stay open. Having good infrastructure is going to be key to that ultimately.
I also think that we should look at it as these students with the IEPs who are doing OT, PT, speech. These are children with medical and emotional disabilities, which I see falls under HIPAA. You have a nurse's station behind a curtain. If they have a medical issue, who's on the other side of that curtain? Who can hear that? Like, these are other privacy issues. You can't do OT and PT and speech all in one section in a cubby hole where people can hear and infringe on that as well. I don't know, that's just a thought that I have.
Hello. Yeah, I completely appreciate the financial commitment of this, and I'm deeply frustrated that we live in a state that doesn't provide a state-level structure of support for our school buildings. And that we have to go to these we live in a small community, and we have to go to our community members and make these requests. At the same time, I am a newer resident to Mount Holly. I'm one of the people who is sort of, that was discussed earlier, coming to the area and putting my children in the schools. My husband and I work locally, and I think a well-funded school that serves the needs of our kids is also an incredible community asset. One of the reasons we came to this district was because the schools are so fantastic, and we ask the staff to do so much, to provide so much in spaces that in many cases are not appropriate for learning. So as much as I understand what we're asking of the voters, I completely think that we don't have a choice.
So this is Dennis again. So the legislature, for the first time in 15 years, is talking about infrastructure money, because they put it off for 15 years, helping school districts maintain their buildings, whether they need fixing like ours or additions. So I'd be interested to see how far that goes this year with the amount of, I'm going to say, overspending the last few years that's we're all going to end up paying for. It trickles down to the taxpayers and stuff. I don't vote against school budgets, and I appreciate all the work, and I understand every bit of the investment that you want to make here. And I'm not saying I'm against it. I am concerned about the addition and other things like that. But I'm worried about property taxes. And I do know that it will not be 18%, I guarantee you, because the legislature can't take that kind of noise from all of us this year or next year, I'll guarantee you. So they will try to control some of that increase and stuff, but it's going to happen. But it'd be interesting to know if we get in contact with our legislators and our senators to ask them, what's the chances of the infrastructure money being available, and if just how much would there be? because I'm for putting for all the grants and all the energy efficiency stuff and refunds and rebates that we can get. But the bottom line for me is, as many of you have said, we've got to do something to improve the quality of the building and the air and everything else for heat and stuff. So I guess we'll see how it goes.
I can speak to that quickly. I am on that school construction aid task force that's supposed to be providing a recommendation to the legislature. Our actual reports due at the beginning of February. And I was just at a meeting prior to this. I don't leave any of those meetings with much confidence that, one, that there's really a huge desire by the state to be able to tackle the issue. I mean, it's about, I think what you'll see is roughly a $6 billion hole in the state of Vermont. That's a really big number to kind of think about and wrap your head around, but it's this kind of huge insurmountable number that they're looking at. Peter Conlon, a representative from I think like the Norwich area of Vermont, he did speak, I think either yesterday or the day before. They're not going to tackle it in this legislative session, the whole thing specifically. I mean, his thoughts and, they want fewer and fewer. That's essentially is what they're saying. And they want to consolidate schools, and they want bigger schools, and they think that, I don't want to point at any specific schools, but they think that these small community schools are a tax burden to the state of Vermont, and that any school construction aid that gets pushed forward would be on the objective of consolidation, from my experience, from what I've heard from the people involved. So,
correct me if I'm wrong here, that the facilities directors meetings I've been to, they are saying if there is funding for school construction projects, and any school district that does do a bond will be retroactive, you'd be available for funding towards those projects.
That wording is currently in the report that's going to be provided. Now, I don't have a whole lot of faith that anything will ultimately come of it. I think that's a really tall task just to begin with, but yes, there would be wording in there that said any bond vote, and what they've been discussing is a construction aid that would essentially pay for a portion of your bond, whether that's somewhere between 20 to 40% of the project cost. And what they said is, and what we recommend to make sure that we're not completely halting projects around the state, is that any project that got passed would essentially be retroactively could apply for this rebate through the state, or construction aid through the state. But I don't have a whole lot of confidence that much will happen. So it seems like there's other legislative priorities that probably go before school construction at this point. So.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Boyle. I had a question for Craig and for the board about staff recruitment and retention, given thinking about this 20-year timeline. I think, speaking as a parent at Mount Holly, this staff is like the biggest asset that this school has. And I wonder what your thoughts or reflections have been in presenting this to the community about the impact of building improvements on staff recruitment and retention. Do you see, for example, that it is harder to recruit specialists when there is an appropriate space, or when specialists, let's say, are looking at a couple of job offers and seeing that, in one school OT is in a closet and in another school it's in a newer facility, or are those things that don't really come up? I'm not sure of how that might impact your decision making, but I'm curious.
Caitlin, thank you for that question. It's a really good question. I think it is having an impact. We, as you said, we have an incredibly talented and dedicated staff, and we have since before I ever got here. You, Ms. Niven. And it is hard to attract people to the field of education, which is kind of ironic when you think about how all of the work in the world springs from our education, right? We wouldn't have doctors and lawyers or sheetrockers or you name it if we didn't have teachers and staff educating our kids. And so sure, when we're trying to be competitive in terms of compensation and when a professional person is looking at a prospective job opportunity, if they're looking at working out of the closet or in an inadequate space versus having a space that's really going to meet the needs of the students they're serving, you know, of course that's going to play into it. And everyone knows it's not just in education. We're having a hard time attracting people to all fields. You know, it's hard to find people that are ready to work. I do want to say I really have a lot of sympathy for people who are speaking to the issue of affordability. I've had a number of people say to me, you know, we can have the most beautiful school in the world, and if people can't afford to live here, what good is that? So, you know, I really commend this board and Eric and everyone that's been, Todd, everyone that's been working on this project for really trying to be very conservative about how to balance the needs of our kids with the needs for affordability and thinking about investing in our community for the future. It's a really hard set of circumstances to balance. And I give you all a lot of credit for thinking so carefully about it all.
So I'd like to just touch base on your question. At Chester Andover, we put 4 new air handlers on the roof at that school. If you know any faculty members there, the staff can't believe the difference in the fresh air in that building. So to answer your question, it's a noticeable difference. So they wish they had done that years ago. So I think it does make a difference, you know. The visual probably would help, but it's the overall air. We never talked about air exchanges per hour until COVID happened. We realized that no school in the country met the federal standard unless it was a brand new building. All of your schools will meet the standards for air exchanges, so your children will be breathing the freshest, cleanest air. That happens at very few schools. They will, with this project, this will change all that. So it will make a difference on, you know, people will notice the difference, not just visual, but not just aesthetics, but the actual building envelope itself, they'll notice it.
Also,
2 things. One, on top of that, I am a teacher in a school that had a project done. The number of days I go home headache-free from the lighting is, I never realized how many headaches I had in my life until the last 2 or 3 years when I don't really have a headache ever. And the only thing that's really changed is the lighting over my head for 8 or 9 hours a day, how many hours I'm sitting there. That is huge to me. But the other thing, and I am not a math teacher, but I just looked at that picture and I sort of in my head estimated, like, taking the addition, dividing it by the total square footage by 3, multiplying by Eric's number of $600. And if we eliminated a part of that, not all of it, but the part that maybe feels like a luxury, we're talking about like $400,000 in Kelly math. I'm not gonna guarantee that's correct math. I don't know, like that to me is like, do I buy almonds or do I buy generic? I don't know. In the big picture of a $9 million, is $400,000 gonna change my tax bill that much in the end? For the potential of having all of these other things that we've talked about.
Everybody good?
I used to be the finance director for an all-boys Catholic high school in South Bronx. So I tend to know a little bit about safety, what we had to do there, but also stuff we had to change and do. And a lot of it we were able to do incrementally by utilizing the staff we had, like our maintenance crew, to paint and retile one classroom at a time, or spaces like that. And I'm wondering if you had considered that. And the second thing, you had mentioned that because the roof, I'm assuming you meant Ludlow, couldn't support it, that's why they didn't consider doing solar. Yet you're going to rebuild that roof because you gotta tear it up because of the water leak. So therefore, it could probably be built strong enough to support the air exchangers you're already talking about putting up there, and any other solar or energy efficiencies that you could take advantage of.
To answer the roof question, what you're referring to, for us, it's a structural component. So when you're looking at a roofing system, you have the rubber membrane, which is your top piece, and then you typically have about 6 inches of insulation. And then below that is this decking material that actually lays on top of your structural steel that holds up your building. That decking material is a tectum decking, which if it gets wet, essentially fails, which is, I assume, why they had that roof collapse in Springfield, because nobody uses tectum decking anymore. It's like an insulation. It's really for sound purposes is why they utilize it a lot. So when we build up the roof at Ludlow, we're not actually touching any of the structures. We're just bringing it back down to that decking, and we're determining if the decking has seen water damage, and we're probably going to have to put essentially corrugated metal decking, which is like an 18 gauge galvanized steel that's more typical of construction that you see today. And then, there's not the structure. We're not actually addressing the structure, the weight capacity of the roof. So before, what happened when they added all of these pitched roofs around the state of Vermont, because your front section has that nice asphalt roof. They did the same thing up in Highgate. They changed the roof load capacity at schools, and then they added a snowdrift capacity as well, which never had accounted before. So before you were looking at about 30 pounds per square foot. Now state requires 40 pounds per square foot. So we did do an analysis at both schools and determined it. And then a ballasted solar system, meaning that you actually have to put rocks on the roof to hold down the solar panels so they don't blow off, is about 7 pounds per square foot. So when we did the structural analysis, we would have to actually add additional bracing below the structure to support the solar panels, which gets very expensive.
I can address the question about custodial maintenance. The majority of that is being done now, but it's maintaining, and we're not increasing or making things better. So if we do have flooring that deteriorates or is problematic, we do change that or painting inside, but it's just been piecemeal together as we go along to keep budgets. I don't think very many of our school budgets have gone up in the past 5 or 6 years as far as maintenance goes. We have budgetary issues. Maintenance is always the first one that sees a cut. So that's over the years, this is how we end up in the position that we are now. So it's unfortunate, but that's instead of cutting classes or teachers, we try to lower maintenance costs, and we end up just going backwards as we go. But they do a great job at trying to keep things put together. Both schools do.
This may not be the time to ask the question, but it's something that came up in my mind as we were talking about the school building. What is the status on the water here?
That's a good question. It still has PFAS in it. This has been an ongoing project for the better part of 3 years. Our engineer that we've been working with just left and went to a new firm. So we're reacclimating ourselves to a new engineer from the same firm. We have a plan in place to put a building in and a water system to make the drinking water drinkable again inside the building. But we are waiting on the state and the State Water Commission, which I've been reporting to the board for 2 years now. We're moving now at a snail space instead of not moving at all. But we are tied up with the state, so our hands are tied right now. We had everything in place, and then the state decided they changed the parameters and didn't want any PFAS in the system, so it's very complicated, it's a very good question, but right now it's status quo. But it's an ongoing project, almost weekly, that we talk with either the state or our engineers about PFAS here. And we've jumped into a little bit about the remediation. The remediation will be another huge project as we move along. It's complicated, to say the least.
And is the lack of potable water here at the school going to affect our being able to maintain our school?
No, they've been maintaining, everything's been going along just fine with bottled water.
Until the state changes its mind.
We don't know what will happen down the road, but if they do that, they'll have to move faster than snail space. If they're gonna tell us we can't use bottled water, then they're gonna have to change their speed and move along, because we are ready to pull the trigger on this project, and we're waiting on their approval to do it.
Sometimes it's easier to do it and ask for forgiveness.
I wish it was that easy, but they're footing the bill for it, so I don't wanna pull them. I don't wanna jump into that and then have them decide that we have to pay for it. So, we're working on it. We're working with the state, so it's complicated.
I actually have one more question. You mentioned we would need another building for the pellets, otherwise they can't hear. It's not because people here can't hear you, but it's being recorded and they can't hear you if you don't use them.
You mentioned that we need a building for the pellet stove, but I don't see that on the schematic. Where would that go?
So the pellet boiler,
Or pellet
most likely looking at somewhere off of the kitchen area, just corner. But most likely on the other side of the driveway of the cafeteria. In that region. We have to be able to back up the pellet truck to it, connect to it, so.
Kind of where the old basketball court is. If you walk out that cafe door.
Thank you.
Everybody good? No. We got public comments. Any public comments? All right, we had plenty. Okay, excellent. Our next meeting is here on Wednesday at 6 o'clock in Zoom. So if you'd like to join us for that, we'll be talking about. That's it. Motion to adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.
You guys have